Somewhere in the distant past, far away from the noise of our modern world, there was a place where something very unusual began to happen. At first, no one noticed it. There were no written records, no observers keeping track, no scientists measuring change. Just a small group of humans living quietly on an isolated island, surrounded by endless ocean. And over time, something about them began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, gently, almost invisibly. They began to grow smaller. Now, before we go any further, just take a moment to settle in. Let your thoughts slow down. And as you listen, imagine yourself drifting back in time, not rushing, just gently moving through history, one quiet moment at a time. Tonight, we are exploring a strange and fascinating mystery. A story about early humans, an island cut off from the rest of the world, and a quiet transformation that challenges what we think we know about evolution. This is not a story of sudden disasters or dramatic events. It is something softer, something slower, a story of time, isolation, and change. Let us begin at the very edge of the known world, around 50,000 years ago. The Earth looked very different then. The climate shifted in long, slow cycles. Massive ice sheets covered parts of the land. Sea levels were lower, and many places that are now islands were once connected by wide stretches of land. Early humans were already moving across continents. They walked, they followed animals, they searched for food, for safety, for better conditions. They did not know where they were going, only that they had to keep moving. And sometimes their journeys led them to places they never expected. Imagine a small group of humans standing at the edge of the land. Before them lies water stretching far into the distance. They cannot see the other side, but perhaps they notice something. Floating vegetation, birds flying in a certain direction. Or maybe, just maybe, they see land far away, faint and unclear. Something pulls them forward, curiosity or necessity. We do not know exactly how they crossed. Maybe they used simple rafts made from wood. Maybe they drifted accidentally, carried by currents. Or maybe over time they slowly moved across small stepping stone islands. However it happened, they arrived. A small group, cut off from everything they once knew. The island welcomed them quietly. There were forests, there was water, there were animals. At first, it may have seemed like a good place to live, safe, manageable, contained. But islands have their own rules, and those rules are not always obvious. When animals live on islands for long periods of time, something interesting often happens. Large animals tend to become smaller. Small animals sometimes become larger. This is known as island evolution or island adaptation. But 50,000 years ago, no one understood this. The humans who arrived there would not have noticed anything unusual, at least not at first. Life on the island was different from the mainland. There were fewer predators, less competition, but also fewer resources. Food was limited, space was limited. Everything was balanced in a delicate way. And over generations, this balance began to shape the people living there. At first, the changes were too small to notice. A slightly smaller body, a slightly lighter frame. nothing that would stand out in a single lifetime. But evolution does not work within a single lifetime. It works across many generations. Slowly, quietly, patiently. Children were born, they grew up. They had children of their own, and with each generation tiny changes added up. A little less height, a little less body mass. And over thousands of years, those small differences became something much more visible. The humans on this island were no longer like the humans they came from. They had adapted. Their bodies had changed to match the environment. Smaller bodies needed less food. They moved more efficiently in dense forests. They required fewer resources to survive. In a place where everything was limited, being smaller was an advantage. But this raises a quiet and interesting question. Did they notice? Did they ever realize that they were different? Or did each generation simply accept their world as normal? Because from their perspective, nothing strange was happening. This was just life. This was just how humans were. Now let us slow down for a moment and look a little closer. Because this story is not just about size, it is about isolation. When a group becomes separated from others, their path begins to change. They no longer share the same experiences. They no longer mix with outside populations. Their world becomes smaller. And in that smaller world, different rules begin to apply. Think about it like this. Imagine a large city full of people from everywhere. Now imagine a small village far away from everything else. Over time, the people in that village may begin to look a little different, speak a little differently, live a little differently, not because anything dramatic happened, but simply because they are separate. And separation changes things. On this island, separation lasted for thousands of years. That is a very long time, long enough for evolution to take a different path, long enough for a new kind of human to emerge. Their tools may have remained simple, their daily lives quiet and repetitive, hunting, gathering, resting, surviving. But beneath that simple life, something remarkable was unfolding. A slow transformation guided by nature itself. And yet there is another layer to this mystery, because shrinking is not always a simple process. It affects everything: bones, muscles, energy, even the brain. So now we must ask, as their bodies became smaller, what else changed? Did their strength change? Did their intelligence change? Did their way of life change? Scientists today believe that when body size decreases, the brain often becomes smaller as well. But smaller does not always mean less capable. Efficiency matters, adaptation matters. The brain may adjust just like the body does. So these island humans, though smaller, may have been perfectly suited to their environment. They knew their land. They understood its patterns. They survived for a very long time. And that might be the most important part of this story. They survived, not by becoming stronger, not by becoming bigger, but by becoming just right for where they lived. As time passes slowly, we begin to see this story in a different way. It is not about loss. It is not about becoming less. It is about change. Quiet, natural, patient change. But this leads us to another gentle question. What happened to them in the end? Did they continue living on the island forever? Or did something else? eventually change their story. We will explore that very slowly as we move deeper into this journey. For now, just let the idea settle in your mind. A group of humans, an isolated island, and a transformation so slow that no one living through it ever truly noticed. As time continues to move quietly forward, the island itself begins to feel different, not because it has changed suddenly, but because we are now looking at it more closely. The forests are thick, but not endless. The rivers are gentle, but not large. The animals that live here are fewer and in many cases smaller than those found on the mainland. Everything about this place feels contained, balanced, limited. Now imagine living your entire life in such a place. You wake each morning to the same landscape. You walk the same paths. You hunt the same kinds of animals. You drink from the same streams. There is comfort in this repetition, but also a quiet boundary. The world does not stretch endlessly here. It stops at the edge of the sea. And over many generations, this limited world begins to shape not only the body but behavior as well. When resources are limited, energy becomes precious. Every movement matters. Every decision matters. There is no room for waste. The humans on this island likely became very efficient. They would not run unless needed. They would not hunt more than necessary. They would learn to move carefully, quietly, conserving energy whenever possible. And slowly their bodies adapted to this way of life. Smaller bodies require less energy. They need less food. They can survive longer during times when resources are scarce. In a place like this, that is not a weakness, it is an advantage. Now let us take a deeper look at the animals around them, because the island was not only changing the humans, it was changing everything. On many islands, large animals become smaller over time. This is something scientists today call island dwarfism. Elephants, for example, have been found in ancient island environments where they became much smaller than their mainland relatives. Imagine a creature as large as an elephant, slowly becoming no bigger than a cow. It sounds unusual, but in a limited environment it makes sense. Less food means smaller bodies are easier to sustain. So on this island, it is possible that the humans were not alone in their transformation. The animals they hunted, the creatures they lived beside, may also have been smaller than expected. The entire ecosystem was adjusting. Everything was finding a new balance. Now think about what this would feel like for the humans living there. They would not see it as strange. They would not compare themselves to distant populations because they had no contact with them. For them, this was simply the natural world. This raises another quiet thought. So much of what we think is normal is based on what we see around us. If everyone you know is a certain height, that becomes normal. If all the animals around you are a certain size, that becomes normal. Without comparison, there is no difference, only reality. And so life on the island continued. Days turned into years, years into generations, generations into thousands of years. The humans adapted not only physically but also culturally. Their knowledge of the island would have grown deeper with each generation. They would know which plants were safe to eat, which areas held more animals, when the seasons changed, even in small ways, because even on a small island time still moves. Rain falls, dry periods come and go. The land shifts in subtle ways, and those who pay attention survive. Now let us move a little deeper into their daily life. Imagine a small group moving through the forest. They are quiet, alert. Their movements are careful, almost effortless. Their bodies are light, adapted to this environment. They are not rushing. There is no urgency, just a steady rhythm of life, searching for food, watching for signs, listening to the sounds of the forest. Their tools are simple, perhaps sharp stones, wooden sticks, nothing complex, but enough to survive. And this is something important to understand. Survival does not always require complexity, it requires balance. And these humans had found that balance. But as we observe this peaceful rhythm, another question slowly begins to form. If life here was so well adapted, so stable, so balanced, then what could possibly disturb it? Because in nature, no system remains unchanged forever. Even the most stable environments eventually shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. Was it the climate, a gradual change in temperature or rainfall? Was it the arrival of new species, or perhaps something else entirely? Let us pause here for a moment, take a slow breath, and let your mind rest in this quiet world. A small island, a group of humans perfectly adapted to their environment, living simple lives, unaware that their story is one of the most unusual in human history. But as we continue, we will begin to see that this balance may not have lasted forever, and that something, somewhere, may have slowly begun to change. As the years drift quietly into centuries and centuries into thousands of years, the island continues its slow, almost invisible rhythm. Nothing feels rushed here. Nothing feels urgent. And yet, beneath this calm surface, time is still shaping everything. At some point, so far in the future that no one living there would remember the beginning, the humans of this island are no longer just slightly smaller. They are clearly different. If someone from the outside world had arrived, they would have noticed immediately. These were not the same humans who once stepped onto this land. They had become something new. Their bodies were shorter, their limbs more compact, their movements perhaps quicker, more efficient. Everything about them reflected the quiet demands of the island. And yet their lives likely continued in the same gentle patterns, waking with the light, resting with the dark, moving through forests, along rivers, across familiar paths worn by generations before them. But now let us look a little deeper beyond the surface, because physical change is only one part of this story. There is another question, a quieter one. What about their minds? As bodies shrink over many generations, the brain often changes too. It may become smaller. But this does not always mean less ability. Sometimes it means different kinds of ability, more focused, more specialized, more suited to the environment. Imagine knowing every sound in the forest, every movement, every subtle change, a snapped twig, a shift in the wind, the distant call of an animal. For these island humans, awareness would have been everything. They did not need vast knowledge of distant lands. They needed deep understanding of one small world. And in that, they may have been incredibly skilled. Now picture a child growing up on this island. From the very beginning, this is the only world they know. They learn by watching, by listening, by slowly exploring their surroundings. They learn which plants to touch and which to avoid, which paths are safe, where water can be found, how to move quietly, how to wait patiently. There is no hurry in their learning, no pressure, just time and experience. And over generations, this knowledge becomes almost instinctive, passed down not through books but through life itself, through stories, through action, through quiet observation. But even in such a stable and adapted life, something else is always present: uncertainty. Because the island, though calm, is not unchanging. Storms may come, seasons may shift, resources may become scarce, even if only for a short time. And when resources become scarce, even small changes can have a large impact. A slightly longer dry season, a slight drop in available food, a small imbalance can ripple through the entire system. Now consider this carefully. When a population is small and isolated, it becomes more fragile. On a large continent, if something goes wrong in one area, people can move. They can find new resources. They can adapt by changing location. But on an island, there is nowhere else to go. The boundaries are fixed. The options are limited. So even though the island shaped these humans perfectly, it also made them vulnerable. This is one of nature's quiet balances. What helps you survive can also limit your future. And so, while these humans lived their calm and steady lives, the world beyond their island continued to change, slowly, quietly, but constantly. Sea levels began to rise over very long periods of time. Land that once connected distant places slowly disappeared beneath the water. Islands became more isolated. Distances grew wider. And with greater isolation came even greater separation. The chances of contact with other human groups became smaller and smaller. But this raises another gentle question: were they truly alone? It is possible that for thousands of years no one else reached their island. No new arrivals, no visitors, just the same small population living and changing together. But history has a way of surprising us, because even in the most remote places, contact can sometimes happen, unexpectedly, quietly. Imagine for a moment a distant group of humans, traveling, exploring, moving across the landscape as humans have always done. Perhaps one day they too reach the edge of the sea. They look out across the water just as others once did long before, and they begin to wonder: could they cross? Should they try? What lies beyond? If they did, and if they succeeded, they might arrive on an island that feels both familiar and strange. The land would seem like any other: forests, water, animals, but the people would be different, smaller, lighter, perhaps moving in ways that seem unusual. What would they think? Would they see them as human? Would they understand them? Or would they feel something they could not quite explain? And what about the island humans? Seeing outsiders for the first time in countless generations, how would they react? Curiosity, caution, fear. We do not know exactly what happened, But these kinds of encounters have shaped human history many times, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. And so, as we sit quietly with this thought, we begin to feel that the story of this island may not have remained isolated forever, because no place, no matter how remote, is completely beyond the reach of time and change. Now let us slow down once more. Let the images settle. A small island, a unique group of humans shaped by thousands of years of quiet evolution, living in balance but also in isolation. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the rest of the human world, slowly moving closer. In the next part of our journey, we will begin to explore what may have happened when these two worlds finally touched, and how that moment may have changed everything. As time moves forward slowly, gently, the distance between worlds begins to feel a little smaller. Not because the island itself has changed, but because somewhere far beyond the horizon other humans are still moving, still exploring, still searching. These are not the same people who first reached the island long ago. Generations have passed. New groups have formed. New paths have been taken, and with each passing century, humans have spread farther across the earth. Some follow coastlines, some move through forests, some cross open lands that stretch endlessly beneath the sky, and sometimes their journeys bring them close to the sea. Now imagine this moment. A group of travelers stands at the edge of the water. They have come far. Their journey has been long, and before them lies something unknown. Perhaps they see distant land, or perhaps they simply wonder what lies beyond. The sea does not speak. It only moves endlessly, quietly. But humans have always been curious. Even in the earliest times, curiosity is soft but powerful. It pulls people forward even when they are unsure. And so, at some point, someone decides to cross. We do not know how. Simple rafts, floating wood, careful navigation along the edges of islands, or maybe just a journey guided by instinct and chance. But eventually, someone reaches the island. For the first time in thousands of years, the quiet isolation is broken. Now let us slow this moment down, because it is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is something much softer. A person steps onto unfamiliar land. The air feels the same yet different. The sounds are new. The forest is quiet, watching. And somewhere not far away, the island humans are there. Perhaps they notice first a distant movement, an unfamiliar shape, a presence that does not belong to their known world. They pause. They observe. They wait, because this is something they have never experienced before, not in their lifetime, not in the memory passed down through generations. And then slowly the distance between them closes. Two groups of humans, separated by thousands of years, meeting for the first time. One group shaped by wide lands, constant movement, and larger populations. The other shaped by isolation, limited space, and a delicate balance with their environment. They look at each other, and in that moment, there is both similarity and difference. They share the same basic form, the same human presence, the same quiet awareness behind their eyes, but their bodies are not the same. Their size is not the same. Their movements, their proportions, even their expressions may feel unfamiliar. What do they think? Do they recognize each other as human? Or does something feel different? We can only imagine, because this moment, if it happened, was never written down. But we do know something important from many other times in history. When different human groups meet, the outcome is never simple. Sometimes there is curiosity, a quiet exchange of observation, learning, watching, understanding. Sometimes there is distance, each group keeping to itself, unsure, careful. And sometimes there is tension, not out of anger but out of uncertainty, because the unknown can feel unsettling, even when it is quiet. Now let us consider something deeper. If these island humans had lived in isolation for so long, their immune systems would have adapted only to their environment. They would have been familiar with certain illnesses, certain conditions, but not others, and the arriving humans would carry with them things unseen, tiny organisms, bacteria, viruses, things that cannot be noticed but can have powerful effects. This is something we have seen many times in human history. When isolated populations meet outside groups, illness can spread quickly, quietly, without warning. And for a small population, even a small outbreak can be devastating. But let us move carefully here, because we do not know exactly what happened. We only understand the patterns that often follow such encounters. It is possible that the meeting was brief, that the visitors did not stay long, that the island returned to its quiet rhythm, or it is possible that something changed, slowly, gently, but permanently. Perhaps new ideas were introduced, new ways of moving, new tools, or perhaps something less visible began to spread, something that the island population was not prepared for. Now let us pause again, take a slow breath, because this part of the story is not about sudden endings. It is about subtle shifts, small changes that grow over time. The island had shaped its people for thousands of years, carefully, perfectly. But now the outside world had touched it, even if only lightly. And once that connection is made, it is very difficult for things to remain exactly the same. As time continues, we begin to wonder, did the island humans continue to thrive? Did they adapt once again? Or did this contact begin a quiet decline? The answer is not simple, and it does not come all at once, because history, like nature, moves slowly, layer by layer, moment by moment. And somewhere in this unfolding story, there is a turning point, a moment so quiet that no one living through it would fully understand its importance. In the next part of our journey, we will gently explore that turning point and try to understand how something so carefully balanced could begin to fade. As time drifts forward, almost like a slow, steady tide, something begins to change. Not all at once, not in a way that anyone could point to and say, "This is the moment." But in small, quiet ways, the balance of the island starts to shift. At first, it might have felt like nothing at all, a slightly longer dry season, a few fewer animals than usual, a hunting trip that takes a little more time, small things, easy to ignore, easy to accept, because life on the island had always required patience. But over many seasons, these small changes begin to add up. food becomes just a little harder to find. The familiar patterns begin to feel less predictable, and for a population that has lived in such careful balance, even a small disruption can be felt deeply. Now let us think about the size of this group. They were never very many, perhaps only a few hundred, maybe even less, living across the island in small groups, connected by shared knowledge and quiet movement. In such a small population, every individual matters. Every loss is felt. Every change has an impact. If even a few individuals struggle to survive, it can affect the entire group over time. And so, as resources become slightly more limited, life becomes just a little more difficult, not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to be noticed in a quiet, persistent way. Now let us return to the idea of contact, because if outside humans reached this island even briefly, they may have left something behind. Not objects, not tools, but something unseen. Illness does not need to be understood to spread. It moves quietly, from one person to another, without sound, without warning. For a population that has lived in isolation for thousands of years, this can be especially dangerous. Their bodies would not recognize these new illnesses. They would not know how to respond. And so, even a mild sickness for one group could become something much more serious for another. We do not know if this happened, but it is a possibility, one that has appeared many times in human history. Now, imagine this slowly unfolding. A few individuals become weak. They cannot hunt. They cannot travel as easily. Others must help them, which means fewer people searching for food, which means resources become even more limited. And so a quiet cycle begins. Less food, less strength, less recovery. Over time, the population may begin to shrink, not through sudden events, but through gradual decline. Now let us step back for a moment, because this is not just a story of difficulty. It is also a story of resilience. These island humans had survived for thousands of years. They had adapted. They had endured. So even as conditions changed, they would not simply give up. They would adjust their patterns, move to different areas, search for new food sources, rely on their deep knowledge of the land. But sometimes, even the best adaptations have limits. And this brings us to a quiet and important idea. Being perfectly adapted to one environment can make it harder to adapt when that environment changes, because all your strengths are tied to a specific balance. If that balance shifts, even slightly, those strengths may no longer be enough. Now, as generations continue to pass, the population may become smaller, more scattered, less connected. Knowledge that was once shared widely may begin to fade. Certain skills, certain understandings may be lost simply because there are fewer people to pass them on. And slowly, the world of the island becomes quieter. Fewer footsteps in the forest. Fewer voices in the distance. Fewer stories shared beneath the night sky. But still, life continues. Because as long as even a few remain, the story is not over. Now let us consider another possibility: climate. Over very long periods of time, the Earth's climate changes, temperatures shift, rainfall patterns move, sea levels rise and fall. Even a small island is not untouched by these changes. A slightly warmer climate could change the types of plants that grow. A slightly drier period could reduce water availability. And each of these changes affects the entire system, the animals, the plants, and the humans. Now imagine all of these factors happening slowly together: slight environmental changes, possible contact with outside groups, a small and vulnerable population. None of these alone may be enough to cause a major shift, but together, over time, they begin to shape a new direction. And this direction may not be one of growth. It may be one of quiet decline, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady. As time continues, the island itself remains. The forests still stand. The rivers still flow. But the people, the unique group of humans who had adapted so perfectly to this place, may be slowly disappearing. And here we arrive at a deeply quiet and reflective moment in the story, because this is not just about what happened. It is about what is no longer there: a way of life, a form of human existence, a unique path of evolution, all slowly fading without leaving behind written words, without leaving behind clear memories. Only traces, bones, tools, small pieces of evidence waiting to be discovered thousands of years later. And this leads us gently into the next part of our journey. Because long after the island humans are gone, other humans will arrive, not to live but to explore, to search, to understand. And in doing so, they will begin to uncover the quiet mystery of what once existed here, a mystery that had been hidden for thousands of years. In the next part, we will step into a much more recent time, a time when modern humans begin to ask questions and slowly piece together the story of the island that changed its people. As the long silence of the island stretches across thousands of years, something new begins to enter the story, not slowly like evolution, not quietly like the shifting of seasons, but gently through curiosity. Time has passed, so much time that the people who once lived there are no longer present. The forests have grown undisturbed. The Arabic Halif, Arabic Lam, Arabic Hamzatat Talif, Arabic Rot, Arabic Dada holds its memories quietly, patiently, beneath layers of soil and stone. And then one day someone arrives again, but this time it is different. These are not early humans searching for survival. These are explorers, observers, people who come not just to live but to understand. They step onto the island with a different kind of awareness. They look more closely. They ask questions. At first, the island may seem ordinary, just another piece of land, trees, rocks, silence. But as they move deeper, they begin to notice something unusual. Perhaps it is a fragment of bone, small, too small to belong to a typical human, or perhaps it is a tool, simple but shaped with intention. Something feels different, and so they begin to search more carefully. They dig, they observe, they document. And slowly, piece by piece, a story begins to emerge. Bones are uncovered, not many, but enough. They are clearly human, and yet not quite like any humans known today. The size is different, the proportions are different, smaller, much smaller. At first, this creates confusion. Are these the remains of children? That might seem like the simplest explanation. But as more bones are found, something becomes clear. These are not children. The structure of the bones, the way they have developed, shows that these were adults, fully grown. And yet, their size is far below what we expect. Now the questions begin to grow. Who were these people? How did they live? And most quietly of all, why were they so small? The scientists study the bones carefully. They measure, they compare, they analyze every detail, the skulls, the limbs, the shape of the body. Each piece adds to the picture. And what they begin to realize is something truly fascinating. These were humans who had taken a different path. A path shaped not by vast continents, but by a single island. A path guided by isolation, limitation, and time. The idea of island dwarfism, once observed mainly in animals, now appears in humans as well. A concept that feels almost unbelievable at first, but the evidence is there. Quiet, clear, patiently waiting to be understood. Now let us pause for a moment, because this discovery is not just about bones. It is about connection. A connection between the distant past and the present. A reminder that human history is not one simple line, but many paths, many stories, unfolding in different places in different ways. And this island holds one of those stories. The researchers give these humans a name, a way to recognize them, to study them, to remember them. And with that, the mystery becomes even deeper. Because naming something does not fully explain it, it only gives us a place to begin. How did they arrive here? How long did they live? What caused their final disappearance? Each answer leads to another question. And this is the quiet nature of discovery. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we do not know. Now, imagine standing in that place. A modern human, surrounded by ancient Arabic Halif, Arabic Lam, Arabic Hamzatat Talif, Arabic Rat, Arabic Dada, holding a small fragment of bone that once belonged to someone who lived tens of thousands of years ago, someone who walked these forests, drank from these Arabic Halif, Arabic Lam, Arabic Meme, Arabic Yet, Arabic Halif, Arabic Hat, lived a life just as real, just as present as our own, and yet so different. There is something deeply humbling about this, because it reminds us that being human has never been just one thing. It has always been changing, adapting, shifting with the world around it. Now, as scientists continue their work, they begin to reconstruct the story, not in a loud or certain way, but slowly, carefully. They study the environment of the island, the types of animals that once lived there, the climate patterns. They try to understand the pressures, the conditions that shaped these people. And gradually, the idea becomes clearer. Limited resources, isolation, a small population, all working together over thousands of years to create a unique human form. A quiet example of how powerful nature can be, not through force, but through patience. Now, as we sit with this discovery, another thought begins to form. How many other stories like this have been lost? How many paths of human evolution existed and then disappeared without leaving enough traces to be found? This island was just one place, but the earth is vast and time is long. There may have been many such stories, some we will never know. And that adds a gentle layer of mystery to everything we study, because even as we uncover the past, much of it remains hidden. And perhaps that is part of what makes it so calming to explore. Not everything needs a clear answer. Sometimes it is enough to simply wonder. And so, as we continue this journey, we begin to move toward a deeper reflection, not just about what happened on this island, but about what it means, what it tells us about humans, about change, about survival, and about the quiet, patient power of time. As we sit quietly with this discovery, holding the image of a small, ancient human in our minds, something deeper begins to unfold. Not just a story about an island, not just a story about shrinking bodies, but a story about what it truly means to be human. Because for a long time, we have imagined human history as a single path, a straight line, moving forward, becoming more advanced, more developed, more the same. But this island gently challenges that idea. It shows us that human history is not one path, it is many. Different groups in different places living in different ways, adapting to their surroundings, not in one uniform direction, but in many quiet variations. The island humans did not become less. They became different. They became exactly what their environment required them to be. And when we think about it slowly, this feels almost peaceful because it removes the idea of failure. It removes the idea that one form of human is better than another. Instead, it shows us something softer. That survival is not about being the strongest or the biggest or the most advanced. It is about being in balance. And for thousands of years, these small humans lived in that balance. Now let us gently return to the moment of discovery. Scientists continue to study the remains. They examine the skull more closely. And here, something even more interesting appears. The brain size is smaller than expected, much smaller than modern humans. At first, this creates confusion because we often associate brain size with intelligence, with ability, with complexity. But the more researchers study these remains, the more they begin to question that assumption. Because intelligence is not just about size, it is about structure, about efficiency, about how the brain is used. And when they look carefully, they begin to see something surprising. Even with a smaller brain, these humans may have been capable of complex behavior. They made tools. They survived for long periods. They adapted successfully to their environment. These are not signs of a simple or incapable mind. They are signs of a mind that works differently. And this leads to a quiet realization. Perhaps intelligence itself is not one fixed thing. Perhaps it changes just like the body does, adapting to what is needed, shaping itself around the world it exists in. Now let your thoughts slow for a moment. Imagine living on that island, not needing to understand vast systems, not needing to build large structures, only needing to know your forest, your water, your food, your rhythms. In such a world, a different kind of intelligence may emerge, one that is deeply connected to the environment, one that is quiet, observant, and precise. And in that sense, these humans may have been perfectly suited to their lives. Now another question gently rises. Why do stories like this feel so fascinating to us? Why do we feel drawn to these quiet mysteries of the past? Perhaps it is because they remind us of something we often forget, that we are not separate from nature. We are part of it. Just like these island humans, we are shaped by our surroundings, our habits, our environment. We change, even now, in ways we do not always notice. But unlike them, our world has become very large, very fast, very connected. We are no longer isolated. We are no longer limited to one small place. And because of that, we sometimes lose that sense of balance. The island, in its quiet way, teaches us something. It shows us a slower way of living, a more connected way, not better, not worse, just different. Now, as we move gently toward the later part of this story, we begin to reflect on something deeper, the idea of disappearance. Because the island humans are no longer here, their story ended. At some point, in some quiet way, but their existence still matters because it adds another layer to our understanding of what it means to be human. It tells us that humanity is not fixed, not permanent, not unchanging. It is something that flows, shifts, adapts, and sometimes fades. But even when it fades, it leaves behind traces. And those traces allow us to remember, to learn, to wonder. Now imagine the island once more, the forest still standing, the wind still moving through the trees, the same land that once held a completely different kind of human life. And yet there is no sign of them now, only silence, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence filled with history, with memory, with quiet stories waiting to be felt rather than heard. And as we sit with that silence, we begin to understand something gentle, that not all stories need a clear ending. Some stories simply fade into time, leaving behind just enough for us to imagine the rest. And perhaps that is what makes them so calming, because they do not demand answers. They do not rush toward conclusions. They simply exist and invite us to slow down and reflect. Now, as we continue just a little further, we will begin to bring these ideas together, not as a final ending, but as a soft understanding of everything we have explored. As everything we have explored begins to settle gently in the mind, the story becomes quieter, not because it is ending, but because it is becoming something deeper. We are no longer just looking at an island or a group of ancient humans. We are looking at time itself, time that moves so slowly that change feels invisible, time that shapes life without ever being seen. On that island, time worked patiently. It did not rush. It did not force. It simply allowed small changes to gather layer by layer until something entirely new appeared. And then, just as quietly, it allowed that something to fade away. Now let us imagine the full arc of this story not as separate moments, but as one continuous flow. A small group of humans arrives on an island. They are like many others of their time, strong, capable, adapted to a wide and open world. But the island is different. It is smaller, more limited, more delicate. And so, over generations, they begin to change, not by choice, not by intention, but by simply living. Their bodies grow smaller, their needs become fewer. Their lives become closely tied to the rhythms of the island. They do not see this as transformation, they see it as normal life. And for thousands of years, that life continues, balanced, quiet, complete in its own way. Then, slowly, the balance begins to shift. Perhaps the climate changes. Perhaps new humans arrive. Perhaps unseen illnesses spread. Or perhaps it is simply the natural limit of a small and isolated world. Whatever the reason, the population begins to decline, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently. Fewer people, fewer connections, fewer shared memories, until one day, without a clear moment to mark it, they are gone, and the island remains. Now, if we pause here and listen carefully, there is something almost peaceful about this, because this story is not filled with noise, not filled with conflict. It is a quiet cycle: arrival, adaptation, balance, change, and then absence. A complete arc shaped entirely by nature and time. And perhaps this is why it feels so calming to reflect on, because it reminds us that not everything needs to be controlled. Not everything needs to be understood completely. Some things simply unfold. Now let us gently bring our attention back to the present. We live in a world that moves quickly, full of constant change, constant noise, but this story offers something different. It invites us to slow down, to observe, to notice the small things, because just like on that island, change is always happening, even when we do not see it. And just like those ancient humans, we are also adapting in our own ways. Our environment is different, our challenges are different, but the quiet process of change continues. Now imagine yourself standing at the edge of that island once more. The air is still. The forest is calm. The ocean stretches endlessly beyond. There are no voices, no movement, and yet the place feels full, full of something unseen, something remembered. A presence that once existed and shaped this land in its own quiet way. And as you stand there, there is no need to ask questions, no need to search for answers, only to feel the passage of time, the softness of change, the quiet rhythm of life appearing and disappearing. And slowly, gently, you begin to understand something simple. That history is not just about events. It is about moments. Small, quiet moments that gather together and become something much larger. And sometimes, those moments leave behind only a trace. A story that we can only piece together with patience and imagination. Now, as this journey becomes softer and your thoughts begin to slow, there is nothing more you need to do, no conclusions to reach, no final answers to hold on to, only the calm awareness that somewhere, long ago, on a small and quiet island, humans once lived in a way that was completely their own. And though they are no longer here, their story still gently exists, resting in the silence of time. And in that silence, you can simply rest as well. Let everything slow, let everything soften, and allow this quiet story to drift gently into stillness. The silence remains soft and unbroken, almost like a gentle presence that does not need to speak. Even though the people are gone, the island still holds them in a quiet way, not in a physical sense, but in something softer, something harder to describe. Every path once walked has slowly faded back into the Arabic Halif, Arabic lamb, Arabic Hamzatat Talif, Arabic Rot, Arabic Dada. Every sound once made has dissolved into the wind. Every moment once lived has become part of time itself. And yet, nothing truly feels lost. Because when we listen carefully, with a calm and patient mind, we can still sense the story. Not as clear images, not as exact details, but as a feeling of something that once existed fully, completely in its own quiet world. Now let us imagine something very simple, a single day on that island long ago. The light of the early morning filters softly through the trees. The air is cool, still. A small group begins to wake. There is no rush, no urgency, only the slow beginning of another day. They move gently, familiar with everything around them. Each step, each movement is part of a rhythm they have known their entire lives. They do not think about the past. They do not wonder about the future. They simply live in the present moment. And in that, there is a kind of peace, a kind of simplicity that feels very far away from the modern world. Now, as the day continues, they move through the forest, not searching in a desperate way, but observing, noticing. They understand this land not through words, but through experience. They know where to go, where to look, when to wait. And as they move, the forest responds. Birds shift in the distance. Leaves move gently. The quiet sounds of life continue all around them. Everything feels connected, balanced. And in that balance they exist naturally, without forcing anything, without taking more than they need. Now let the image slowly fade, because this moment, like all moments, does not last forever. The light changes, the day softens, the shadows grow longer, and eventually night returns. A calm, deep night, filled with quiet darkness and a sky full of distant stars. Perhaps they sit together, perhaps they rest. There are no written stories, no recorded history, only shared presence. And in that presence their lives continue day after day, year after year, until slowly, without a clear ending, those days come to an end. Not in a single moment, not in a way that can be seen or remembered clearly, but in the same quiet way they lived, they fade. Now, as we return once more to the present, there is something gentle to take from all of this. That life, in all its forms, is temporary, not in a sad way, but in a natural way. Everything that exists changes. Everything that lives moves through time. And sometimes the most meaningful stories are not the ones filled with noise or drama, but the ones that unfold quietly and leave behind only a soft trace. Now, as your mind slows even further, there is no need to think deeply, no need to analyze, only to feel the calm rhythm of this story. A rhythm that began long ago on a small island with a small group of humans who lived, adapted, and slowly changed. And though they are gone, their story still drifts gently through time, like a quiet echo that never fully disappears. Let that feeling remain soft, steady, and calm. And as everything becomes still, you can simply rest within it. And as that quiet feeling lingers, almost like a soft echo in the distance, the story gently opens once more, not to add noise, not to change what has already passed, but to look at it from an even deeper place. Because sometimes when everything becomes still, we begin to notice things we missed before. Let us return just for a moment to those early days, before the change, before the slow transformation, a small group of humans arriving on unfamiliar land. At that time, they were not yet different. They carried with them the same form, the same strength, the same way of life as others of their kind. They did not know that this island would shape them. They did not plan for it. They did not choose it. And yet, simply by staying, by living, by adapting, they became something new. This is a quiet truth of life. We are always being shaped by where we are, not just by big events, but by small, repeated moments. The food we eat, the paths we walk, the environment we live in. All of these things slowly, gently guide change, and because the change is slow, we rarely notice it. Just like those island humans never notice themselves becoming smaller, we too change in ways we do not see. Now let that idea rest for a moment, because it connects the past to the present in a very simple way. The story is not only about them, it is also about us. We may live in a very different world, a faster world, a louder world, but the quiet process of change is still there, always working, always shaping. Now imagine if someone, thousands of years in the future, were to look back at us. What would they see? Would they notice changes that we cannot? Would they see patterns that are invisible to us now? Just as we look at the island humans and see their transformation clearly, perhaps one day others will look at us in the same way. And this thought is not unsettling. It is simply part of the flow of time. Now let us return once more to the island itself. The wind still moves through the trees. The Arabic halif, Arabic lamb, Arabic hamza leaf, Arabic rot, Arabic dada still holds its quiet memory. But now there is also something else. Understanding, not complete, not perfect, but enough to feel connected. We understand that this place once held a unique form of human life, a life shaped entirely by its environment. We understand that change does not always move toward one direction, and we understand that disappearance does not erase meaning. Because even though those humans are no longer here, their story still teaches something gentle. It teaches patience. Because everything in their world happened slowly, without urgency, without force. It teaches balance, because their survival depended on living in harmony with their surroundings. And it teaches acceptance, because their story did not resist change. It simply moved with it. Now, as we allow all of these thoughts to settle, the story becomes very light, very calm. There is nothing more to uncover, nothing more to explain, only something to feel. A quiet awareness that life in all its forms is part of a much larger rhythm, a rhythm that does not rush, that does not demand, but simply continues. And as you sit with that rhythm, there is a natural sense of slowing down. Your thoughts become softer, your breathing becomes steady, and the story no longer feels like something outside of you. It feels like something you are gently resting within, a calm space where time moves slowly, and everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. And in that space, there is nothing left to do, only to remain quiet, still, and at ease. And now, very gently, we can allow this story to come to rest, not as a sharp ending, but as a soft closing, like the final light of day slowly fading into night. The island is still there, unchanged in its quiet presence. The forests continue to breathe. The wind continues to move just as it always has. But the people who once lived there, the small, unique humans shaped by time, isolation, and nature, have returned to the earth. They left no written words, no clear memories, no voices that we can hear. And yet their existence remains, not loudly, not clearly, but gently in the traces they left behind, in the bones beneath the soil, in the patterns we have slowly begun to understand, in the quiet realization that human history is far more complex and more beautiful than we once believed. Their story does not end with disappearance, because even though they are gone, they have given us something, a deeper understanding of change, a softer view of evolution, a reminder that being human has never meant being just one thing. It has always meant adapting, shifting, becoming, and sometimes quietly fading. Now, as we step away from this ancient island, we carry with us a calm and simple thought that life does not need to be loud to be meaningful, that even the quietest stories, lived in the smallest places, can hold something vast and timeless, and that change, even when unseen, is always a natural part of existence. So let the island remain in your imagination, a small place surrounded by endless ocean, where long ago humans lived in their own quiet way. And as that image slowly softens and fades into stillness, there is nothing more to follow, nothing more to search for, only a gentle silence and the peaceful understanding that some stories are not meant to end with answers, but with calm, with reflection, and with rest. Now you can simply let go of the story and drift quietly into sleep.